My name is Matthew, and I am 35 years old. When I was 8, my parents abandoned me because I was not as smart as my identical twin brother Nathan. They kept him and sent me away to live with my grandmother. That was 27 years ago. Last month they suddenly reached out wanting to reconnect. They had no idea who I had become or about the amazing new family I had built for myself. The reunion they wanted so badly. It did not go as they expected. Before I dive into my story, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had to create your own version of family. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, in what appeared to be a perfectly normal middle-class family. My father, Richard Wilson, was a university professor of engineering who spent his evenings hunched over complex equations and academic journals. My mother, Eleanor, worked as a high school principal, known throughout the district for her strict standards and unwavering dedication to academic excellence. Looking back, I should have recognized these as warning signs of what was to come. In a household where intellectual achievement was the only currency that mattered, I was destined to be found wanting. My twin brother Nathan showed signs of exceptional intelligence almost from the moment we could speak. By age 3, while I was still struggling with basic sentences, Nathan was already reading simple books independently. My parents would parade him in front of visitors, asking him to recite facts or solve simple math problems, beaming with pride at their prodigy. Nathan has a photographic memory, my mother would announce to anyone who would listen. He is going to change the world someday. By 5, Nathan was solving multiplication problems and writing short stories with perfect spelling. Our kindergarten teacher suggested he skip directly to 2nd grade, which my parents eagerly approved. This was the first physical separation between us, the first of many to come. I was not stupid. I want to make that very clear. But compared to Nathan, I appeared slow, struggling with reading and writing, in ways that baffled my academically accomplished parents. Years later, long after they had removed me from their lives, I would be diagnosed with dyslexia. But in those early years, there was no explanation for why words seemed to swim across the page when I tried to read them, or why I reversed letters when I wrote. Why can you not just try harder? My father would demand, his face flushed with frustration, as he watched me stumble over a simple reading assignment. Your brother was reading this level 2 years ago. Every comparison was another brick in the wall being built between us. I attempted to carve out my own place in the family through other avenues. While Nathan excelled in mathematics and science, I discovered I had good coordination and natural athletic ability. At 7, I joined a local youth soccer team and found joy in the physical freedom of running across an open field. My coach praised my instincts and teamwork. When I eagerly told my parents about scoring a goal, my father nodded distractedly and immediately turned the conversation back to Nathan's latest achievement in his advanced science class. I tried art next, creating colorful drawings that my 1st grade teacher, Mrs. Blackwell, displayed prominently in the classroom. Matthew has a wonderful sense of color and composition, she told my mother during a parent-teacher conference. My mother nodded politely, then spent the remainder of the meeting discussing how the school curriculum was failing to challenge Nathan sufficiently. Around the house, I became the helpful one. I would clear dishes without being asked help with yard work, and offer to walk our elderly neighbor's dog. I was desperate for some acknowledgement, some sign that I had value in my family, despite not being the intellectual superstar my brother was. The occasional pat on the head or distracted thank you from my parents became treasures I collected and revisited in the quiet of my bedroom. Family dinners were particularly painful. Each evening we would sit around our oak dining table while my parents interrogated Nathan about what he had learned that day. He would enthusiastically describe complex scientific concepts or historical facts he had absorbed, while my parents listened with rapt attention, occasionally exchanging proud glances. When they eventually remembered to ask about my day, the brief silence that followed my ordinary school anecdotes spoke volumes about their disappointment. "Well, that sounds nice," my mother would say, with a tight smile before quickly changing the subject back to Nathan's latest academic achievement or the advanced program they were considering for him next. When we turned 7, I began overhearing conversations about special schools for Nathan. My parents would lower their voices, but in our modest 2-story home, their excited discussions carried through the heating vents to where I would sit at the top of the stairs listening. The Brookfield Academy has one of the best programs for gifted children in the country, my father said one evening. They rarely accept students this young, but they are very interested in Nathan. It would be such an incredible opportunity for him, my mother replied. But it is across the country. How would we manage that logistically? There was a pause, and even at 7 years old, I felt a chill of foreboding. We need to consider all options, my father finally said. Nathan's potential cannot be wasted. This could set the trajectory for his entire future. Little did I know then that they were also discussing the trajectory of my future, a future that would not include them. The day everything changed started like any other. It was a crisp autumn morning, and I was playing with Legos in my bedroom, while Nathan was at his weekend enrichment program for gifted children. With the house unusually quiet, I could clearly hear my parents' voices drifting up from the kitchen. They were not making any effort to keep their voices down, perhaps assuming I was too absorbed in my play to listen. We simply cannot afford both, my father said, his voice tense with frustration. The tuition for Brookfield is substantial, even with the partial scholarship. Plus, the costs of relocating across the country, maintaining 2 households, until we can sell this house. I know, Richard, my mother responded with a sigh. But this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Nathan. Dr. Phillips said he has the highest aptitude scores he has seen in 20 years of testing. We cannot deny him this chance. There was a long pause before my father spoke again, his voice lower but still audible. What about Matthew? The local schools are clearly not equipped to handle his learning difficulties. The way he hesitated before saying learning difficulties made it sound like a shameful secret, something to be hidden away. I stopped clicking Lego pieces together, my hands suddenly still. My mother has been suggesting he come stay with her, my mother said slowly. She lives near a school district, with better special education resources. It might be the best solution for everyone. Just until we get settled with Nathan at Brookfield. Just until, my father repeated, though. Something in his tone suggested he did not entirely believe it either. 3 weeks later, I watched in confusion as my mother packed my clothes into 2 suitcases. She explained that I was going to have a special visit with grandmother Irene in Nebraska. When I asked how long I would be staying, she avoided meeting my eyes. For a little while, she said, vaguely folding my favorite dinosaur t-shirt with uncharacteristic care, Grandmother Irene is excited to have you. But what about school? What about my friends? I asked, panic beginning to rise in my chest, as the reality of what was happening began to sink in. You will go to school near grandmother's house. You will make new friends, she replied, with forced brightness. Is Nathan coming too? I asked, already knowing the answer. My mother's hand stilled momentarily on my clothes. No, Nathan will be attending a special school here, for gifted children. When will you and Dad and Nathan come visit? I persisted, tears beginning to well in my eyes. Soon, she promised, finally looking at me with an expression I could not quite read. Very soon. The morning of my departure, I sat on the front porch steps with my suitcases beside me, waiting for my mother to finish her private conversation with Nathan. My father had already left for work with a quick, awkward pat on my shoulder and a distracted, "Be good for your grandmother." No proper goodbye. No indication that he was sending his 8-year-old son away indefinitely. Nathan emerged from the house, first looking uncomfortable and confused. At 8 years old, even a genius could not fully comprehend the family dynamics at play. You are coming back, right? He asked, sitting beside me on the step. I shrugged, trying to appear braver than I felt. Mom says it is just for a little while. Nathan nodded, then impulsively reached into his pocket and pulled out his prized possession, a small plastic model of the solar system that our science teacher had given him for winning the school science fair. Here, he said, pressing it into my hand. You can borrow this until you come back. It was the nicest thing he had ever done for me, this simple acknowledgement that he expected to see me again. I clutched the small plastic planets tightly in my fist as I watched him walk back into the house that would continue to be his home, but no longer mine. The drive to Nebraska took 2 days. My mother maintained a steady stream of artificially cheerful conversation for the first few hours, pointing out landmarks and suggesting car games. But as the miles stretched between us and Portland, she grew increasingly quiet, answering my questions with one-word responses, until eventually She turned up the radio to fill the silence. We arrived at Grandmother Irene's small bungalow on a tree-lined street. In a town so small, it had only one traffic light. My grandmother greeted us with genuine warmth, though I noticed her shooting questioning glances at my mother when she thought I was not looking. My mother stayed for dinner and helped set up my things in the small spare bedroom that would now be mine. The room had clearly been hastily prepared, with mismatched furniture and walls still painted in the faded yellow from when it had been my mother's childhood bedroom. "I will call you every Sunday," my mother promised, as she prepared to leave the next morning. "And we will visit as soon as we get Nathan settled at his new school." I clung to her during our goodbye, suddenly terrified at being left with my grandmother, whom I had only met a handful of times before. "Please do not leave me," I whispered against her coat. For a moment I felt her stiffen, and I thought perhaps she was reconsidering. Then she gently detached my arms from around her waist. "Be good for grandmother," she said, smoothing my hair one last time. "This is what is best for everyone right now." As her car disappeared down the street, I stood next to my grandmother on the porch, a cold Nebraska wind cutting through my thin Portland jacket. I did not know then that it would be 27 years before I would see my mother again. The first few months I genuinely believed my parents would come for me. Every Sunday I would sit by the phone waiting for my mother's call. Sometimes she would call as promised, though the conversations were always brief and centered around Nathan's adjustment to his new school. Sometimes the calls would come a day or two late, with hurried apologies about busy schedules. Sometimes they did not come at all. For the first Christmas they sent a package with a few toys and new clothes. There was a school picture of Nathan in his Brookfield uniform, looking serious and older somehow, though it had only been 3 months. The card was signed, "Love, Mom, Dad, and Nathan," in my mother's handwriting. Nathan had not written anything himself. Letters came sporadically at first. Short notes from my mother with carefully edited updates about their new life. Nathan had skipped another grade. My father had been asked to consult on a prestigious research project. They had bought a house near Nathan's school. They were very busy, but thinking of me often. After the first year, the letters stopped entirely. The monthly checks for my support continued to arrive in Grandmother Irene's mailbox, but they were sent from an accountant's office with no personal notes attached. My 9th birthday came and went, with only a store-bought card arriving 3 days late. Eventually, I stopped expecting anything more. The gradual ghosting by my own parents was perhaps more painful than a clean break would have been. Each missed call, each forgotten holiday, each passing month without contact was another small abandonment, another confirmation that I had been not just physically left behind, but emotionally discarded as well. Life in small-town Nebraska was as different from Portland as it could possibly be. Grandmother Irene's house sat on Maple Street, 3 blocks from the town's only elementary school. The house itself was small but tidy, with faded floral wallpaper and furniture that had been in place since the 1970s. My grandmother was 73 when I came to live with her, her movements already slowed by arthritis and her energy limited. She had not planned on raising another child in her golden years, but she welcomed me with a quiet, steady affection that became my lifeline. "Your mother was always headstrong," she told me one evening, as she knitted in her recliner while I did homework at the kitchen table, always chasing after the next achievement, never quite satisfied with what was right in front of her. There was no bitterness in her assessment, just a sad wisdom. Some people are like that, always looking to the horizon instead of at their feet. "It is not your fault she cannot see what I see." "What do you see?" I asked, hungry for any affirmation. She set down her knitting and looked at me with clear blue eyes that had faded with age, but missed nothing. "I see a kind boy who helps Mrs. Peterson bring in her groceries without being asked. A creative boy who can build amazing structures with just scraps from the lumber yard. A boy who tries his best even when things are difficult." She smiled gently. "That is worth more than any grade on a report card." School continued to be challenging. The rural elementary school did not have the resources of Portland's educational system, but it did have something I had never experienced before. Teachers who had time to notice when a student was struggling. My 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Jenkins, was the first to suggest I might have dyslexia after observing my difficulty with reading tasks. "Matthew reverses letters consistently," she explained to my grandmother during a parent-teacher conference. "And he struggles with phonetic decoding. But his comprehension, when material is read aloud to him, is excellent, and his problem-solving skills are strong. I think we should have him evaluated." The diagnosis that followed was both a relief and a vindication. My struggles had a name, and more importantly, there were specific techniques and accommodations that could help me learn more effectively. The school's resource teacher, Mr. Benson, began working with me 3 times a week, teaching me strategies to decode text and organize information. "Dyslexia has nothing to do with intelligence," Mr. Benson emphasized during our sessions. "Some of the most brilliant minds in history had dyslexia: Albert Einstein, Thomas Edison, Leonardo da Vinci." My parents did not think I was smart. I admitted one day, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Mr. Benson's expression softened. "Then they missed seeing an important part of who you are. Intelligence comes in many forms, Matthew. The way you can visualize 3-dimensional structures, when we do our building projects, that is a kind of genius in itself." While my grandmother provided a safe home, it was our neighbors, the Harrison family, who truly changed the course of my life. Jack Harrison was a year older than me, and became the brother I had lost. His parents, Robert and Susan Harrison, welcomed me into their home from the first week I arrived in town. "We thought the new kid might want someone to shoot hoops with," Mr. Harrison said simply when he walked over with Jack that first Saturday morning. From that day forward, their house became my second home. Mr. Harrison owned a construction company and took me under his wing when he noticed my interest in building. While my own father had never had time to teach me practical skills, Mr. Harrison showed infinite patience as he taught me how to use tools safely, how to read blueprints, and how to transform raw materials into something useful and beautiful. "You have got good hands," he would say approvingly, as I learned to measure twice and cut once, "and a good eye for how things fit together. That is not something you can teach. It is just there, or it is not." Each Christmas, a card would arrive from my parents with a formal studio portrait of Nathan and a typed update of his accomplishments. Made the debate team, won the state science fair, accepted to a summer program at MIT, youngest student ever to, highest score ever recorded in, special recognition for. The cards never asked how I was doing or mentioned visiting. They were more like press releases than family correspondence. I was 15 when grandmother Irene's health began to fail rapidly. A series of small strokes left her confused and unable to care for either herself or me. When the social worker came to discuss options, I sat frozen with fear at the kitchen table, certain I was headed for foster care. "We have spoken with your parents," the social worker said gently. "They feel that at this point, returning to their household would be too disruptive for everyone involved. Your brother is in a critical phase of his education, and they feel a more stable solution would be best." Even at 15, I understood what she was really saying. They still did not want me back. What I did not expect was Robert Harrison clearing his throat from where he stood by the sink. "Susan and I have discussed this," he said firmly. "If Matthew is comfortable with the arrangement, we would like to apply to become his guardians. He is already part of our family in every way that matters." The relief that flooded through me was so intense I had to blink back tears. The social worker looked surprised, but pleased. "That would need to be approved by his parents and the court, of course," she said. "But it could be an excellent solution." My parents signed the guardianship papers without even coming to see me or to say goodbye to grandmother Irene before she passed away a month later. The court date was scheduled, paperwork processed, and just like that, I officially became part of the Harrison family. The monthly support checks were now sent to the Harrisons, though. Mr. Harrison put every penny into a college fund for me. "Your money is your money," he insisted. "We did not take you in for financial support. We have got enough for what we need." At grandmother Irene's funeral, I stood between the Harrisons as the small town turned out to pay respects to a woman who had been part of their community for over 7 decades. My parents sent flowers but no card. Nathan sent a brief, awkward note that suggested he had been told to write it rather than choosing to do so himself. As I watched the casket being lowered into the ground, I realized that the last connection to my biological family was being severed. But as Susan Harrison's arm wrapped around my shoulders and Jack stood solid beside me, I understood that family could be found rather than just born into. "We have got you," Susan whispered, "for as long as you need us." And for the first time since being left in Nebraska, I believed that I was truly not alone. My high school years with the Harrison family gave me something I had never experienced before: stability. The Harrisons' home on Elm Street became my sanctuary, a place where achievements were celebrated but never became the sole measure of a person's worth. Jack and I shared a room with bunk beds until Mr. Harrison converted their garage into a bedroom for me during my sophomore year. "Every young man needs his own space," he said, as we hung drywall together, "somewhere to figure out who you are becoming." Under Mr. Harrison's guidance, I discovered my passion for construction and design. While my dyslexia still made traditional academics challenging, I excelled in drafting and technical drawing classes. My spatial reasoning abilities, which Mr. Benson had identified years earlier, translated perfectly to visualizing how buildings could come together. By senior year, I was working part-time for Harrison Construction, learning the business from the ground up. While my classmates worried about college applications, I already knew my path. I would attend the local community college for their architectural design program while continuing to work with Mr. Harrison. "College is important," Mr. Harrison told me, as we reviewed my applications. "But so is practical experience. By the time you finish your degree, you will already have 5 years of real-world knowledge under your belt. That puts you miles ahead." It was during my second year of college that I met Sophia Moretti in a materials science class. With her dark curly hair and quick laugh, she captivated me from the first day. Unlike most people who were drawn to my quiet competence, Sophia saw something more. "You have sad eyes," she told me, matter-of-factly after class one day. "But when you talk about building things, they light up completely. It is like watching someone transform." Our friendship developed slowly. At first study sessions at the library, coffee, after class, eventually dinner at a small Italian restaurant, where she teased me for ordering spaghetti rather than trying something more adventurous. "Life is too short for playing it safe with pasta choices," she declared, twirling her fork in a plate of risotto. Same goes for everything else. When I finally told her about my family history, we were sitting in my truck outside her apartment after dating for 3 months. I had been avoiding the subject, afraid that the knowledge that my own parents had found me disposable might change how she saw me. Instead, she listened quietly, her eyes growing fierce as the story unfolded. "They were wrong about you," she said, when I finished, her voice vibrating with emotion. "So completely, utterly wrong. And they missed out on knowing someone extraordinary." Sophia's family was everything mine had not been: loud, demonstrative, and unconditionally loving. Sunday dinners at the Moretti household were a chaotic affair, with her parents, grandparents, 3 siblings, and various aunts, uncles, and cousins crowded around extended tables in their backyard. Her father, Franco, who had built a successful plumbing business after immigrating from Italy as a teenager, took an immediate liking to me. "So you build things, eh?" he asked during my first visit, his accent still strong despite decades in America. "Good, good. A man should create something that remains after he is gone. Buildings, family legacy. These are what matter." By the time I finished my degree in architectural design at 23, I had not only gained a surrogate family in the Harrisons, but had been fully embraced by the Moretti clan as well. With my diploma in hand and 5 years of practical experience working for Harrison Construction, I was ready for the next step. "I am thinking of starting my own company," I told Mr. Harrison one evening, as we sat on his deck watching the sunset, focusing on custom residential design and construction. "But I do not want you to think I am competing with your business or being ungrateful for everything you have taught me." Mr. Harrison chuckled, taking a sip of his beer. "Son, I would be disappointed if you did not strike out on your own eventually. That is the whole point, to raise you up so you can build something that is yours. Besides, I am thinking about scaling back in a few years. Maybe you will buy me out when I am ready to retire." With a small business loan and Mr. Harrison's blessing, I founded Wilson Custom Homes at 25. The early years were lean, with Sophia and I living in a tiny apartment and reinvesting every penny of profit back into the business. But my attention to detail and commitment to quality quickly earned me a reputation among homebuyers, looking for something beyond cookie-cutter designs. By 27, the business had grown enough to hire 3 full-time employees. Sophia, who had earned her degree in interior design, joined the company as well, creating a seamless process where clients could design both the structure and interior elements of their home with a unified vision. "We make a good team," she said one night, as we reviewed plans for a lakeside home that would be our largest project yet, in every way that matters. My proposal came shortly after, on a crisp fall evening, at the construction site of what would become our own home, the first I had designed specifically for us. I had arranged for the concrete foundation to be poured with a special message embedded in it, visible only when the work lights were positioned just right. "Marry me, Sophia." Our wedding at 28 brought together the two families that had chosen me, the Harrisons standing proudly as my side of the family with Robert as my best man, and Jack as a groomsman, while the Moretti family engulfed the entire event, in their exuberant celebration of love. Susan Harrison and Maria Moretti had bonded over wedding preparations, creating a seamless blend of traditions that reflected the family we were creating together. When Emma was born a year later, I experienced a healing I had not known I needed. Holding my daughter in my arms, I made a silent promise that she would never question her place in my heart or her value in my eyes. Every milestone from her first smile to her first steps was celebrated not for what it might predict about her future potential, but simply for the joy of watching her grow. Lucas followed 2 years later, completing our family with his curious nature and infectious laugh. Our home echoed with the sounds I had missed in my own childhood. Spontaneous giggles, music, occasional tears, quickly soothed, and always the reassurance that they were loved unconditionally. As my business grew, so did our extended family traditions. Thanksgiving at the Harrisons, Christmas Eve with the Morettis, New Year's at our house, with everyone crammed in together. Emma and Lucas grew up surrounded by grandparent figures, who doted on them cousins both biological and honorary, and the certainty that family was something vast and inclusive rather than conditional and exclusive. Through distant relatives who still occasionally kept in touch, I heard about Nathan's continuing achievements. He had become a renowned research scientist, his work in theoretical physics earning him prestigious awards and academic recognition. I felt no jealousy when I heard these updates, only a distant curiosity about the brother who had once shared my face, but whose life had followed such a different trajectory. By my 35th birthday, Wilson Custom Homes had become one of the most sought-after construction companies in the region, with a waiting list for our services and a portfolio of award-winning designs. The scared 8-year-old boy, abandoned by his parents, had built not just a successful business, but a life rich with genuine connections and purpose. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, as I reviewed blueprints in my office, an email notification appeared on my computer screen with a name I had not seen in 27 years, Eleanor Wilson. The email sat in my inbox for 20 minutes. While I stared at the sender name, my coffee growing cold beside me. Eleanor Wilson. My mother. After 27 years of silence, what could she possibly have to say that would matter now? Finally, with a steadying breath, I clicked to open it. Dear Matthew, I hope this email finds you well. It has been far too long since we have been in contact, a reality for which I take full responsibility. I am writing now because circumstances have made reconnection seem not just desirable, but necessary. Your father has been diagnosed with a serious heart condition. His prognosis is uncertain, and he has expressed deep regret about the estrangement between us and you. We have both come to recognize far too late, I fear, the terrible mistake we made in sending you away. Nathan has been encouraging us to reach out to you for years, and we have finally found the courage to do so. We have moved back to Portland following your father's retirement from the university. If you would be willing to meet with us, we would be deeply grateful for the opportunity to apologize in person and perhaps begin to build some kind of relationship, whatever that might look like. I understand if this request seems presumptuous after so many years of silence. We do not deserve your forgiveness, but we hope you might consider it. With regret and hope, Eleanor Wilson. The emotions that crashed through me were overwhelming anger, curiosity, pain that felt surprisingly fresh, and beneath it all, a strange sense of vindication. They regretted their choice. They acknowledged it had been a mistake. After all these years of wondering if I had somehow deserved to be discarded, here was confirmation that the fault had been theirs, not mine. Sophia found me still staring at the computer screen half an hour later when she came into the office to discuss a client meeting. Matt, what is it? She asked immediately, sensing my distress. Wordlessly, I turned the screen toward her and watched as her expression shifted from confusion to shock to protective anger as she read. The nerve, she whispered when she finished reading. After all this time, they reach out because he is sick. Where were they when you graduated? When we got married? When Emma and Lucas were born? Her indignation on my behalf was both comforting and clarifying. These were the questions that mattered. What are you going to do? She asked her hand, finding mine across the desk. I do not know yet, I admitted. Part of me wants to delete it and pretend I never saw it. Part of me is curious, and part of me, I hesitated, searching for the right words. Part of me wants them to see what they missed. Who I became, despite them, not because of them. Sophia nodded slowly. Whatever you decide, I am with you. But take some time before you respond. This is not something that requires an immediate answer. That evening, after the children were in bed, I called Dr. Carson, the therapist I had been seeing periodically since my 20s, to work through the abandonment issues that still occasionally surfaced in unexpected ways. This is a significant development, she said, after I explained the situation. How are you feeling about it? Conflicted, I admitted. There is this 8-year-old part of me that still wants their approval, still wants to know why I was not enough. And there is the adult me who knows I do not need anything from them anymore. Both of those responses are valid, Dr. Carson replied. The question is not whether you should feel one way or the other, but what would serve your well-being now. Meeting them might provide closure, or it might reopen old wounds. Only you can decide if the potential benefits outweigh the risks. Over the next few days, I found myself thinking about Nathan as well, my twin brother who had been the unwitting catalyst for my abandonment. According to my mother's email, he had been encouraging them to reconnect with me. What did that mean? Had he felt guilt all these years? Curiosity. Did he wonder, as I sometimes did, how different our lives might have been if our parents had made different choices? A week after receiving the email, I discussed it with Robert and Susan Harrison during our monthly dinner at their house. Those people, Susan said, her voice tight, with the anger she had always felt on my behalf. They do not deserve to know the wonderful man you have become. Robert was more measured, setting down his fork and considering me with the thoughtful gaze that had always made me feel truly seen. The question is not what they deserve, but what Matthew needs. This might be your only chance to say the things you have carried all these years, to close that chapter fully on your terms. His wisdom, as always, cut through to the heart of the matter. This was not about them. It was about what would allow me to move forward with the fullest sense of peace. That night, I drafted my response. Eleanor, I am willing to meet once. I will be bringing my family, the people who have actually been there for me all these years. We can meet at Giovanni's restaurant on Highland Avenue next Saturday at 1 p.m. Matthew. I kept it brief and set clear boundaries. No mention of forgiveness or relationship building. No emotional revelations. Just a practical agreement to a single meeting on my terms with my support system in place. The reply came within hours. Thank you, Matthew. We will be there. Nathan would like to come as well if that is acceptable to you. Your father and I look forward to seeing you after all this time. Eleanor. As the meeting date approached, I found myself increasingly anxious. What would they look like after all these years? Would I still resemble Nathan? Or had our different life paths altered us physically as well as emotionally? What did I actually want from this encounter? The night before the meeting, I sat with Sophia on our back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. I keep thinking about what I will say to them, I confessed, and everything that comes to mind sounds either too angry or too forgiving. I do not know how to find the right balance. Sophia took my hand, her strength flowing into me as it had countless times before. You do not need to have a script, just be honest in the moment. And remember, she squeezed my hand. You are not that abandoned little boy anymore. You are a man who built a beautiful life and family. You are meeting them from a position of strength, not need. I nodded, drawing comfort from her words and the solid reality of our life together. I have asked the Harrisons to come too. Is that okay? Of course, she replied, without hesitation. They are your parents in every way that matters. Having them there makes perfect sense. The next morning, I dressed carefully in a tailored suit that projected the successful businessman I had become. Sophia wore an elegant blue dress that complemented her confident presence. We decided to leave Emma and Lucas with Sophia's parents. This meeting was not one I wanted to subject my children to until I knew what to expect. Robert and Susan Harrison picked us up in their car. Robert looking distinguished in his Sunday best and Susan radiant with protective maternal energy. Remember, Robert said as we drove toward the restaurant, you do not owe them anything. This meeting is a gift you are choosing to give. If at any point you want to leave, just say the word. With these people who truly loved me by my side, I felt ready to face the ghosts of my past. Giovanni's Restaurant was my deliberate choice for this meeting. Not only was it upscale enough to create a certain formality, but the owner, Marco Moretti, was Sophia's uncle. He had reserved a private room in the back and promised to personally oversee our service, a silent show of support that meant more than he could know. We arrived 15 minutes early, allowing us to settle into the private dining room and prepare mentally. Marco greeted us warmly, embracing Sophia and clasping my shoulder with understanding. Everything is arranged as you requested, he said. The best table, the special wine, the privacy. And if you need anything at all, I am right outside. The room was elegant but intimate, with a round table that would seat 8 comfortably. I positioned myself so that the door would be visible, wanting to see them enter rather than having them appear suddenly at my side. Sophia sat to my right, her hand, occasionally squeezing mine under the table. The Harrisons sat to my left, forming a protective semicircle of support. At precisely 1 o'clock, Marco appeared at the door. Your other guests have arrived, he announced with professional courtesy, though I could see the slight tightening around his eyes. Sophia had undoubtedly shared enough of my history for him to have formed his own opinions. And then they were there, framed in the doorway like an old photograph suddenly brought to life. My father Richard, once tall and commanding, now stooped slightly, his hair completely gray and his face lined with age and illness. He leaned on a cane, the hand gripping it, showing prominent veins and age spots. My mother Eleanor, her blonde hair now silver, but still styled in the same neat bob she had worn 27 years ago, her posture rigid as ever, despite the passage of time. And between them a stranger, who was also hauntingly familiar. Nathan, my mirror image, altered by different experiences, his face thinner than mine, his bearing more academic, but his eyes were the same ones I saw in the mirror every morning. For a moment we all simply stared at each other, the gulf of 27 years stretching between us like an unbridgeable chasm. Then I stood more out of ingrained politeness than genuine welcome. Thank you for coming, I said formally, the words feeling strange in my mouth. These were the people who had given me life, who had shared my earliest years, and yet they were complete strangers to me now. My mother moved first, taking a step toward me, with one hand half raised, as if she might touch me, then thinking better of it. Matthew, she said, her voice catching, you look wonderful. I acknowledged her comment with a slight nod, then gestured to the empty chairs. Please sit down. Let me introduce you to my family. The emphasis I placed on the word family was subtle but unmistakable. I saw my father flinch slightly as he lowered himself carefully into a chair. This is my wife Sophia. I began, drawing strength from her presence. And these are Robert and Susan Harrison. They became my guardians after grandmother Irene passed away, but they have been my true parents in every way that matters for most of my life. The awkwardness was palpable, as handshakes were exchanged. My biological parents clearly had not expected me to bring others, especially not people who represented their replacement. Nathan shook hands more genuinely, meeting each person's eyes with what appeared to be sincere interest. It is good to finally meet you, he said to me, when the introduction circled back to us. I have wondered about you, often. Before I could respond, a waiter appeared with water and menus, creating a momentary distraction from the emotional tension. As we studied the options, I used the opportunity to observe them more closely. My father's hands trembled slightly as he held the menu. My mother kept glancing at me when she thought I would not notice her expression, a mixture of wistfulness and apprehension. Nathan seemed the most at ease, though there was a watchfulness about him, as if he were cataloging every detail of this strange reunion. After we ordered, an uncomfortable silence descended. My mother finally broke it, setting down her water glass with determination. "Matthew, I know there is nothing we can say that would adequately address what happened." She began, her voice steady, despite the emotion evident in her eyes. "But I want you to know that sending you away has been the greatest regret of my life. At the time, we thought we were making a rational decision based on limited resources and Nathan's exceptional needs, but we were wrong. Terribly wrong." My father cleared his throat. "We made what we believed was a practical choice." He added, his tone more measured than my mother's. "Nathan's opportunity at Brookfield required our full attention and financial resources. We thought you would be better off with your grandmother, where you could receive more individualized educational support." The clinical way he framed the abandonment of his child made something harden in my chest. Even now, he was justifying, rather than truly apologizing. "You did not just send me to grandmother's for better educational support," I said quietly, but firmly. "You gave me away and never looked back. You missed 27 years of my life. You missed my high school graduation, my college graduation, my wedding. You missed the birth of your grandchildren. Those were not practical choices, they were abandonment." My mother's eyes filled with tears. We know that now. We thought at first it would be temporary, but then it became easier to just continue as we were. Time passed, and the longer we went without contacting you, the harder it became to bridge that gap." Nathan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I did not understand what had happened until I was much older," he said. "They told me you were better off with grandmother, that you were happy there. By the time I realized the truth, we were teenagers, and I did not know how to reach out." I looked at my twin, seeing both the shared genetics and the profound differences between us. "Did you ever wonder about me?" I asked, genuinely curious. "About who I became?" He nodded, meeting my gaze directly. "All the time. Especially during major life events. When I graduated from MIT, when I published my first paper, when I received my first grant, I always wondered where you were, what you were doing, if you hated me for being the one they kept." "I never hated you," I said truthfully. "You were a child too. The choices were not yours." Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of appetizers. As we began to eat, Robert Harrison spoke up for the first time since the introductions. "Matthew has built an extraordinary life," he said, his pride evident. "Wilson Custom Homes is one of the most respected construction and design firms in the region. He employs 30 people now and has a waiting list of clients eager for his work." I saw the surprise register on my parents' faces. Clearly, they had not expected the learning disabled child they had discarded to achieve professional success. "That is remarkable," my father said, reassessing me with new interest. "Construction and design, you said." "Architectural design and custom home building," I clarified. "We specialize in high-end residential properties." "We?" my mother inquired. "Sophia is our interior design director," I explained, placing my hand over my wife's, too blank. "We offer clients a seamless experience from initial concept through construction and finishing." "How wonderful that you work together," my mother said, attempting to sound warm and interested. "Nathan has recently accepted a position at Pacific Northwest University. That is partly why we moved back to Portland, to be closer to him." Of course they had. Even after all these years, Nathan remained the center of their universe. As our main courses arrived, the conversation shifted to more general topics, the changes in Portland over the years. Nathan's research work, the unusual weather patterns this spring. It was the kind of superficial discussion strangers might have at a dinner party, carefully avoiding anything too personal or potentially divisive. Until my father, perhaps emboldened by the apparent normalcy of our interaction, decided to broach the real reason for their outreach. "Matthew, your mother mentioned my health situation in her email." He began, setting down his fork. "The doctors have recommended a specialized treatment protocol that shows promising results for my condition. Unfortunately, our insurance covers only a portion of it, and the out-of-pocket expenses are substantial." I felt Sophia stiffen beside me, and Robert Harrison's expression darkened. The true purpose of this reunion was finally emerging. "Are you asking me for money?" I asked bluntly, cutting through the pretense. My father had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Not asking exactly, but if you were in a position to help and felt inclined to do so, it would certainly be appreciated. Family supporting each other in difficult times is, well, it is what families do." The irony of him invoking family obligation after 27 years of abandonment was breathtaking. I set down my utensils and looked directly at him. "Let me make sure I understand correctly," I said, my voice level, despite the anger building inside me. "You abandoned me when I was 8 years old, because I was an inconvenient financial burden that might detract from Nathan's opportunities. You signed away your parental rights when I was 15 without even coming to see me. You missed my entire life. And now that you need something, you reach out and appeal to family loyalty." My mother interjected quickly. "That is not the only reason we wanted to reconnect, Matthew. Your father's illness has made us reflect on our mistakes, and the limited time we may have left to make amends." "Convenient timing," Sophia observed quietly, unable to remain silent any longer. "His success and your need happening to coincide." Nathan looked mortified. "I encouraged them to reach out years ago," he said, "long before Dad's diagnosis. They were afraid you would reject them." With good reason, Susan Harrison noted her protective instincts fully engaged. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My father stared down at his plate, while my mother dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. Nathan looked between us all, clearly distressed by the direction the conversation had taken. I took a deep breath, centering myself before speaking again. "I will help with your medical expenses," I finally said, causing everyone at the table to look at me in surprise. "Not because you have any claim on me as family, but because it is the right thing to do. I will have my accountant contact you to arrange the details." Relief washed over my father's face, followed quickly by what appeared to be genuine shame. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That is very generous, considering everything." "It is more than generous," Robert Harrison said firmly. "It is extraordinary and speaks to Matthew's character, not to any obligation he has toward you." My mother reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of touching mine. "We have missed so much," she said, her voice breaking. "Your childhood, your accomplishments, your wedding, our grandchildren." "Yes," I agreed simply. "You have. By choice." "Is there any possibility," she ventured cautiously, "that we might meet your children someday? Begin to build some kind of relationship with them?" The protective instinct that surged through me was immediate and fierce. "No," I said definitively. "My children have grandparents who love them unconditionally, who would never abandon them if something better came along. I will not confuse them by introducing people who might disappear from their lives on a whim." My father flinched as if I had struck him, while my mother's tears spilled over. Nathan looked down at his hands, unable to meet my eyes. "You have to understand," I continued more gently but no less firmly. "You walked away from being my parents 27 years ago. That choice had consequences. I built a life without you, a family without you. I found people who chose me every day, who supported me through every struggle and celebrated every success. Those are my children's grandparents, the people who earned that role through years of love and presence." "What about Nathan?" my mother asked tentatively. "Would you consider allowing him to know you better, to be an uncle to your children? He was not responsible for our decisions." I looked at my twin, seeing the hopeful uncertainty in his expression. Despite everything, there was still a connection there, the bond of shared beginnings, if nothing else. "That would be a separate conversation," I conceded, "between Nathan and me, at another time." As dessert was served, the weight of 27 years of absence hung heavily over the table. We had said what needed to be said, acknowledged what could not be denied. There would be no Hollywood reconciliation, no tearful embraces, no magical healing of wounds that had scarred over long ago. When the meal concluded, we all stood somewhat awkwardly. My father extended his hand to me. "Thank you for meeting with us," he said formally, "and for your generosity regarding my treatment. I know we do not deserve it." I shook his hand briefly. "I wish you well with your health," I replied, meaning it despite everything. My mother seemed about to move in for an embrace, but stopped herself when she saw my expression. "The man you have become," she said, her voice thick with emotion, is remarkable. I wish we could take some credit for that, but we cannot. We missed everything that matters. Yes, I agreed simply. You did. As they prepared to leave, Nathan hung back. Could we talk sometime? He asked, his voice low. Just the two of us. There is so much I would like to know about your life, if you are willing to share it. I considered him this stranger who shared my DNA, my original face, my earliest memories. I will think about it. I promise, not ready to commit, but not entirely closed to the possibility either. As we watched them walk out of the restaurant, Sophia slipped her arm through mine. You were magnificent, she whispered. Compassionate but clear. Generous, but not a pushover. Robert Harrison clasped my shoulder firmly. Your grandmother would have been proud of the man you have become, he said, and we could not be prouder to call you our son. Walking out into the sunshine with these people who had truly chosen me, I felt a weight lifting that I had not even realized I had been carrying. The confrontation I had both dreaded and needed was behind me. I had faced my past without being diminished by it. I had shown my parents exactly what they had missed, not just my success, but the man of integrity I had become, despite their abandonment. And in doing so, I had finally set myself free. The days following the restaurant confrontation passed in a blur of conflicting emotions. There was anger that still flared, unexpectedly sadness for the relationship that might have been, and beneath it all, a strange sense of peace. I had finally said the things I had carried silently for decades, and in doing so had released their power over me. Sophia noticed the change first. You seem lighter somehow, she observed as we prepared dinner together a week after the meeting. Like you have put down something heavy you have been carrying a long time. She was right. Though I had worked through much of my abandonment trauma in therapy over the years, there had always been unspoken questions lurking beneath the surface. Why was I not enough? Did they ever regret their choice? What would they think of the man I had become? Now those questions had answers, imperfect as they were. As promised, I arranged for my father's medical care to be covered. My accountant set up the payments to go directly to the medical facility rather than to my parents, a boundary that felt important to maintain. I did not want monthly financial transactions to become a substitute for the relationship they seemed to suddenly desire. 2 weeks after our meeting, I received a text from Nathan asking if I would meet him for coffee. After discussing it with Sophia and Dr. Carson, I agreed to see him alone at a cafe near my office. Nathan arrived early, already seated with 2 cups of coffee when I walked in. The strange mirror effect of seeing my own features reflected back with subtle differences was still disconcerting. His hair was styled differently than mine, his build slightly leaner, his clothing more academic in nature, but the fundamental resemblance was undeniable. I got you coffee, he said somewhat awkwardly. I realized I do not know how you take it, so I asked for cream and sugar on the side. It was a small thing, but it highlighted the vastness of what we did not know about each other, the basic preferences and habits that siblings typically absorb through years of shared space. Black is fine, I said, taking the seat across from him. Thanks. For a moment, we simply studied each other, cataloging similarities and differences. I want to apologize. Nathan began, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. Not for our parents' choices, those were not mine to make, but for not trying harder to stay connected to you. For accepting their narrative that you were better off with grandmother. For not questioning why we never visited, never called regularly, never brought you home for holidays. His sincerity was evident, and something in me softened slightly. You were a child too, I reminded him. It was not your responsibility to maintain our relationship. That was on them. Nathan nodded, though he still looked troubled. Maybe not when we were 8, but later. When I was older and began to understand what had really happened, I could have reached out then. Why did not you? I asked, genuinely curious rather than accusatory. He sighed, running a hand through his hair, in a gesture so similar to my own that it was startling. Partly shame, I think, partly fear that you would hate me for being the one they kept, and partly, he hesitated, partly because I was living a life that had been built on your absence. My education, my opportunities, they came at your expense. Acknowledging that felt impossible. I considered his words, appreciating his honesty, even as it stirred complicated feelings. What was it like, I finally asked. Growing up with them, focusing everything on you. Nathan's expression shifted, a shadow crossing his face. Not what you might imagine, he said quietly. There was love, yes, but always conditional on achievement. Every success raised the bar higher for the next expectation. By the time I was in high school, I was having panic attacks before exams, terrified of disappointing them. In college, I nearly had a breakdown trying to maintain the perfect GPA, the research position, the academic publications they expected. It was a perspective I had never considered, that being the chosen child might have carried its own burdens. Not comparable to abandonment, certainly, but not the uncomplicated privilege I had imagined either. They defined me entirely by my intelligence, Nathan continued, just as they defined you by your learning difficulties. Neither view was fair or complete. We talked for nearly 3 hours that afternoon, beginning to fill in the vast gaps in our knowledge of each other's lives. I learned about his research in quantum physics, his failed marriage to a fellow scientist who could not understand his growing disillusionment with academic pressure, his recent decision to step back from research to focus on teaching. He listened intently as I described building my business, falling in love with Sophia, creating a family based on acceptance rather than achievement. Would you be open to meeting again? He asked as we prepared to leave. I know I cannot make up for 27 years of absence, but I would like to know my brother if you are willing. I considered his request, weighing the potential benefits against the risks of letting someone connected to my past pain into my carefully constructed present. I think I would like that, I finally said. Slowly, one step at a time. Over the following months, Nathan and I developed a cautious friendship. We met occasionally for lunch or coffee, gradually expanding our comfort with each other. He respected my boundaries about my parents, never pressuring me to include them in our emerging relationship. 6 months after our initial reunion, I invited him to Sunday dinner at our home, the first time he would meet my children. We prepared Emma and Lucas, carefully explaining in age-appropriate terms that Uncle Nathan was my brother who had lived far away for a long time, but who wanted to get to know them now. Watching Nathan interact with my children that evening, answering 8-year-old Emma's endless questions about space, with patient enthusiasm, and getting down on the floor to build block towers, with 5-year-old Lucas, I felt another piece of my healing click into place. My children would know their uncle would have that connection to my biological past, but on my terms and without the toxic dynamics that had shaped my own childhood. My relationship with my parents remained much more limited. I received occasional emails from my mother with updates on my father's health, which improved significantly with the treatments I had funded. I responded politely, but briefly, maintaining the emotional distance that felt necessary for my well-being. A year after our restaurant confrontation, I invited the Harrisons over for a special dinner. With Sophia's help, I prepared all of Robert's favorite foods and set the table with particular care. What is the occasion? Susan asked, as they arrived, noticing the formal table setting and the good wine breathing on the counter. Gratitude, I answered simply. I wanted to thank you both properly for being my real parents when I needed them most. Robert looked momentarily taken aback, then cleared his throat gruffly to hide his emotion. No thanks necessary, son. You made it easy to love you. Over dinner, we reminisced about my teenage years in their home, the driving lessons in Robert's old pickup truck, the science projects Susan had helped me with, the weekend fishing trips with Jack, the holiday traditions they had included. Brought me in without hesitation. I want you to know, I said, as we lingered over dessert, that meeting my biological parents only confirmed what I already knew, that family is defined by love and presence, not by blood or obligation. You chose me every day, in all the ways that mattered. That choice made all the difference in who I became. Susan wiped tears from her eyes, while Robert simply nodded, too moved for words. The depth of our connection needed no elaborate expression. It was evident in the thousands of small moments of support and love that had built our relationship over decades. As the months passed, I continued my occasional therapy sessions with Dr. Carson, working through the complex emotions stirred up by reconnecting with my biological family. Forgiveness does not always mean reconciliation, she reminded me during one session. You can forgive them for your own peace without needing to build a close relationship with them now. It was a liberating perspective, that I could release the anger and resentment that had occasionally shadowed me without obligating myself to create a relationship that did not feel authentic or safe. With this understanding, I found myself able to share more of my past with my children as they grew older, adapting the story to their age and understanding. I wanted them to know where they came from, but more importantly, to understand the values that truly defined our family. Family means showing up. I explained to Emma one evening after she asked why she saw Uncle Nathan sometimes, but rarely saw the grandparents he talked about. It means being there for the hard days and the happy days. It means loving someone for exactly who they are, not who you want them to be. She considered this with the solemnity of a child grappling with an important concept, like how Grandpa Robert taught you to build things, even though you had trouble reading. Exactly like that, I confirmed, amazed at her intuitive understanding. He saw what I could do, not what I could not do. That is what real love looks like. On a bright Saturday morning in spring, I stood beside Robert Harrison on the sidelines of Lucas's first Little League game. My son, nervous but determined, stepped up to the plate, with his too big helmet sliding slightly over his eyes. Robert and I cheered encouragingly as he took his stance, his small face screwed up in concentration. When he connected with the ball and took off running, his surprise and delight were palpable. Robert and I erupted in cheers, while Sophia and Emma jumped up and down in the stands. It was a simple moment of family joy, unmarred by expectations of perfection or achievement pressure, just pure celebration of effort and fun. As Lucas reached first base, turning to wave excitedly at us, I felt a profound sense of completion. The circle had closed. The abandoned child I had been was now the father who would never abandon his own children, who would love them unconditionally and celebrate their unique gifts, whatever form they took. My journey had taught me that family is not an accident of birth, but a deliberate choice made day after day. It is shaped not by shared DNA, but by shared experiences, consistent presence, and unwavering support. It is built through thousands of small moments of showing up, of choosing to stay, of seeing the whole person, rather than just their achievements or failures. In the end, my parents' greatest gift to me was unintentional. They gave me the freedom to discover what family truly means and to create one based on love rather than obligation. Through their absence, I found people who chose to be present. Through their conditional regard, I learned to love without conditions. Through their abandonment, I discovered my own capacity to remain. That knowledge is the legacy I now pass to my children, that they are loved for who they are, not for what they achieve, that they have value simply by existing, that they will never need to earn their place in our family, that they are enough, exactly as they are. If you have ever had to create your own version of family, I hope this story resonates with you. Family is not always who you are born to. Sometimes it is who finds you, who chooses you, who stays when others leave. If you have found your chosen family, treasure them. If you are still looking, do not lose hope. And if you are considering becoming that person for someone who needs family, know that your presence can change the entire trajectory of a life. Like, subscribe, and share this video if you believe that real family is defined by love, not blood. And tell me in the comments, who is the person who showed up for you when you needed them most? Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the family we choose is often the greatest blessing of all.